Brought to you by Alman Auctions, the worldwide leader in antique tractor auctions.
Different strokes for different folks, I reckon. It's they probably just grew up with them, and when the people go to the shows, first thing they say, oh, my dad or my grandfather had one like that, and I drove it when I was a kid.
J.R. Gyger is a retired farmer who spends winters in Florida and summers back home in Lebanon, Indiana, where he's got a bunch more of these case machines. In his farming days, he used a total of 37 new cases over the years. But when J.R. started collecting tractors, at first he thought he'd go for all colors.
Yeah, I wanted to have all kinds. I wasn't going to be narrow-minded. I had all colors, and it is nice to see a row of tractors out there, all colors, the red and the green and the Moline Prairie Gold. That's a pretty color. And when you got a row of them, it's nice, but it's just better, I think, for me to stay with one kind because I know them.
And J.R. does know his case tractors. He and his sons like to fix them up, but sometimes his wife needs a little convincing.
Oh, yes, but she's a sportsman. She finds out they're worth a little bit of money. I suppose. No, she supports me. She don't say anything. She just lets me do my thing.
J.R. likes to show off this 530 utility tractor with its special Grove fenders. And he has many more Case Orchard models, but one of his favorite projects is this little bundle of power on tracks.
Well, it's just a pretty little tractor, I think. Make a nice little watch fob.
This little watch fob, as J.R. calls it, is one classic you don't see much of. A rare bug, you might say.
Just a plain old Case 310 crawler. There's not a lot of them around. In fact, there's one in Antique Power that was featured this last, but he put the wrong headlights on it. He had square headlights, supposed to have these round ones that look like a frog. And the later ones, they put the lights down in the grill. That's how you can tell if it's an early one, if it's got the ugly lights up in the top. And they made them for several years. They went through different phases, put the lights down in the grill, and they had this one that just had a straight blade on. Later on, you could get a angle blade. You could get a bucket for it. And this is actually an ag crawler. They made an industrial, but it was yellow.
JR's 310 was built in 1957. It features 3 forward speeds and 1 reverse gear, and a pretty powerful gasoline engine under the hood of this mighty mite.
It's a Case engine, 148 cubic inch. They used this engine in a lot of different things. It had a little dozer blade on it, just for light dozer work. In fact, it had a blade on it when I got it, and I took it out and played with it. And it didn't do a lot. It would spin. I suppose it was limited to what you could do because it's little.
JR hunts far and wide for Case tractors to add to his collection, but this one was easy to find. It just took a little horse trading.
Well, a friend of mine had it. He was going to restore it. He overhauled the engine, and he wouldn't have parted with it for nothing. But I ended up with something he wanted real bad. So when you got something he wants, and you got a little trading there. So that's how I ended up with it.
The 310's engine was in running condition, but the rest of it was in tough shape. Before JR put a lot of sweat into making this little crawler shine.
And it was pitted real bad. The tracks and everything, it was all rusty. It's my first experience. I didn't do a real good job on the tracks, but I tried to do a good job on the sheet metal.
What's the best thing about this tractor on tracks? With its lever-controlled steering and brakes, JR says it's just different and fun to drive.
Being just a little crawler, I reckon, which they didn't make very many of them. It's kind of unique. I never owned a crawler before. Probably when I drove this the first time I'd ever been on one. It gives you a thrill when you load it on a trailer and it looks like it headed to the moon, and when it goes over center, it flops down. Or when you're unloading it, it goes halfway and then tilts back up the other way. It gives you a thrill.
Just like all those who've caught classic tractor fever, for JR there is pure joy in preserving history and restoring these old Case machines to their former glory.
The pride of fixing them up is the main thing, taking them to show. Once it gets a hold of you, it's just like any other thing. You really get into it.